On my first night as a police officer in Whitmore, Alaska, I learned one rule that kept every cop alive. If you hear a child laughing inside the station after dark, you run. And on day 7, I heard it. The first thing they told me when I arrived in Alaska was that every cop who came to Arka Harbor eventually learned to stop asking why. Why the nights seemed to stretch longer than they should. Why the wind sometimes sounded suspiciously like a voice calling your name.
Step into the light.
Why there were 7 rules written on a weathered card that looked older than the town itself, rules delivered with such unwavering gravity that no one dared laugh. But I didn't hear those rules until my second hour on the ground. What I heard first was a voice, a child's voice calling my name from an empty runway. It was the kind of detail most men would bury deep in their mind, blame it on exhaustion, stress, or the cold biting into bone. But I remember it clearly because I hadn't told a single soul in Alaska my first name yet. That's the moment that should have made me board the plane and leave. Instead, I stayed. And because I stayed, I learned every line of the secret rulebook the way a drowning man learns the weight of his own breath. The plane landed hard, skidding on ice that had no business being that smooth. I gripped the armrest, teeth clenching as the nose dipped too far left before the pilot corrected. When we finally stopped, the cabin went quiet in a way that didn't feel normal. It was the kind of quiet that seemed to press in, like the world outside was holding its breath. Through the frost-blurred window, I saw nothing but snow and the dark, jagged outline of pine ridges. Arka Harbor didn't look like a place. It looked like the lonely edge of the world. I stood, grabbed my duffel, and followed the handful of passengers down the narrow aisle. The wind hit me halfway down the metal stairway, a slicing, needle-like impact that punched through my jacket and clothes until it settled straight into my bones. The cold here didn't just surround you, it claimed you. I made it 10 steps toward the terminal building before I froze. Everything around me was empty except for a single maintenance light flickering over the metal siding. No workers, no baggage crew, no snowplows. Then from somewhere near the fuel shed, maybe 20 yards away, I heard it. Light, breathy, unmistakably young. Jordan. My full name isn't common, and no one here knew me yet. I turned sharply toward the sound, scanning the empty white expanse. Nothing. Just the echo of wind dragging itself across the ice. I told myself it was the gusts or the howl of distant cables, but the voice had shape, tone, and intent. The kind of whisper a child uses when they're playing a game only they know the rules of. I didn't move for several seconds, my breath fogging the air in uneven clouds. The rational part of me insisted I was imagining things after a long flight. The part of me that had spent 11 years as a cop, the part that had stood in doorways waiting for gunfire, whispered a different truth. Something had spoken, something that should not have. I forced myself forward through the cold. The terminal's interior wasn't any warmer. It was a single square room with 3 plastic chairs, a flickering heater, and a man behind a counter who looked like he'd been thawed from a block of ice. He glanced at me, then back at his newspaper. If he'd heard the voice, he didn't show it. I stamped my feet to bring feeling back, scanning for whoever was supposed to meet me. That's when I saw her. A woman in a heavy navy parka stood across the room, arms folded, boots covered in packed snow. Her face was lined but resolute, with deep-set eyes that had seen more winters than I could guess. Her stance radiated calm authority, the kind that never needed to raise its voice. When our eyes met, she didn't nod or wave. She simply waited, studying me like someone measuring whether I belonged here at all. "Officer Jordan Hale?" she asked in a voice as cold and crisp as the air outside. "Yes, "Ma'am." She stepped toward me, her heavy boots echoing faintly on the linoleum. "Chief Mara Ellsworth, your gear goes in the truck. We leave now." There was no handshake, no welcome, no pleasantries, just a command, and I followed it without question. Outside, an aging SUV idled with a steady plume of exhaust rising into the white sky. She threw my bag in the back and climbed behind the wheel without another word. I closed the passenger door, and the cold immediately tried to fight its way inside through any gap in the seals. As the SUV rolled away from the terminal, I tried to get a sense of the place. We passed endless pine walls rising like dark spears through the snow. Clouds hung low, swallowing half the mountains. The world felt tighter here, as if the horizon had been pulled closer to the ground. "First time in Alaska?" Chief Ellsworth asked, eyes on the road. "First time this far north," I said. She grunted, a sound too non-committal to be agreement or disapproval. "Ohio won't prepare you for this." I wasn't sure whether she meant the weather or something else. A few minutes passed in silence, except for the soft clatter of tire chains and the occasional crackle of radio static. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a leather-bound card the size of a wallet photograph. Without looking, she handed it to me. "These are the rules. Memorize them." I expected general department policy, emergency contacts, maybe environmental safety guidelines. But when I flipped the card open, I froze. 7 rules written in thick, slanted handwriting, each line carved into the leather like someone had pressed hard enough to scar it permanently. Rule 1. If you hear footsteps above the station after dusk, evacuate immediately. Rule 2. If a figure stands still among the spruce trees, do not move until it leaves. Rule 3. Never speak to a voice calling your name from an unseen place. Rule 4. Do not open your door after midnight, regardless of who knocks. Rule 5. If the black fox crosses your path, feed it. Rule 6. If the air suddenly warms in winter, retreat indoors immediately. Rule 7. The last rule is earned, not told. I stared. Not one rule resembled real police protocol. They read like folklore or the unhinged scribbles of someone losing their grip on reality. "Is this some kind of initiation joke?" I asked, forcing a laugh. Chief Ellsworth didn't look at me. Her profile was stone. "Officer Hale," she said calmly, "no one jokes about the rules." Her tone carried a weight that pressed deep enough to silence me. Something inside me tightened, a low vibration of instinct telling me these rules were less superstition and more lived necessity. We passed a hand-painted sign that read, "Arka Harbor. Population unknown." Below the text, someone had scratched into the wood, "We stay alive by knowing the rules." We entered the outskirts of the town, a scattered collection of cabins, a small processing plant by the coast. A quiet stretch of road lit by dim street lamps whose light barely cut through the falling snow. Everything about the place felt like it existed one step away from the world I knew. Chief Ellsworth pointed as we drove. "General store, clinic, pier, school, coffee shack. Keep your eye on that one. They close early for a reason." "What reason?" She didn't answer. A few minutes later, we pulled up in front of a squat one-story building with a metal roof heavy with snow. The sign above the door read Arka Harbor Police Department. The letters looked recently repainted, as if someone kept having to restore them. Inside, the station was warmer, lit by humming fluorescent lights. A small lobby led into an open office with 4 desks, only one with personal belongings on it. A coffee pot gurgled in the corner. "This'll be your desk. Restrooms over there, your apartment's upstairs. Get settled. Reed will take you on patrol in the afternoon." "Reed?" I asked. "Senior officer." He'll teach you the rest of what you need to know." She paused at her office door, then turned back toward me with an expression I couldn't read. "And Officer Hale, follow the rules. They're not optional." When she shut her door, the room felt strangely vast, as if silence expanded to fill it. I set my duffel on the desk and took a slow breath, trying to piece together what I'd walked into. I had transferred to this remote outpost because I needed space from the memories that haunted me from my old department. Burnout had been eating at me like frostbite, spreading slowly until I could barely feel anything. I thought Alaska would give me a chance to start clean, but here in this strange and lonely town, something else lingered in the air. I unpacked for the next hour, organizing my gear, skimming reports left behind on my desk, all routine: trespassing, a break-in, a few intoxicated locals, an incident at the pier no one had elaborated on, nothing that screamed supernatural or dangerous. But the rulebook pressed against my thigh each time I moved. I couldn't help glancing at it, the leather edges worn and darkened by decades of hands. By noon, I heard boots crunching through the snow outside, followed by the door opening. A tall man stepped in, snow dusting his shoulders. He looked mid-40s with sharp eyes and a kind of quiet focus you only found in people who'd lived through more than they talked about. "You must be Hale," he said, extending a gloved hand. "Officer Reed Lawson." "Call me Reed." "Nice to meet you," I said, shaking his hand. "Chief give you the rules?" "Yeah. I'm still deciding if you guys rehearsed that delivery." Reed cracked a half smile but didn't laugh. "You'll understand soon enough. Ready for a tour?" He led me outside to an SUV with heavier chains and a reinforced front bumper. "You'll want something with teeth out here," he said. We drove through town at a slow, deliberate pace. He pointed out landmarks with the kind of familiarity born from repetition. The general store doubled as everything from a hardware shop to an informal gossip hub. The clinic had only one doctor and one nurse. The diner at the end of the strip served meals that tasted like survival in its purest form. Reed talked easily, but something shifted in him when we reached the tree line at the north end of town. He fell silent for a long moment, then said softly, "Don't walk there alone. Ever." "Why not?" He let the question hang in the air before answering. "Because the tree line watches back. And sometimes it likes to choose who walks too close." I didn't ask for clarification. Some instinct told me I didn't want to know yet. We continued the tour until late afternoon when pale sunlight faded behind thick clouds. Back at the station, Reed dropped me off and clapped my shoulder with a firm, grounding pressure. "Get some rest, Hale. You'll need it." I went upstairs to my apartment. It was small but clean, with a kitchenette, bed, and single window overlooking Main Street. I unpacked the last of my things, placed my badge on the nightstand, and collapsed onto the bed. For a while, I just lay there listening to the faint hum of the heater. Then, without warning, the sound changed. A soft scraping moved across the hallway, slow and deliberate, something like fingertips dragging along wood. I sat up, pulse spiking. The rulebook flashed across my memory. Rule 1. If you hear footsteps above the station after dusk, evacuate immediately. This wasn't footsteps above me. This was something moving right outside my apartment. But the quality of the sound carried the same uncanny wrongness the rule implied. I held my breath, listening. The scraping stopped. Silence returned. I exhaled shakily. Rationally, it could have been anything. A branch hitting the siding, ice shifting on the roof, pipes contracting. But deep down, I knew it wasn't any of those things. This place had rules for a reason. I didn't sleep that first night. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the leather card, reading each rule again and again until the words blurred under the dim lamplight. Something was here in Arka Harbor. Something old. Something patient. And I had just begun to understand the first whisper of its presence. Before we go further, if you're into true scary stories based on real experiences from real officers in places most people won't dare live, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It helps us more than you know, and it keeps stories like this coming. The deeper we go into Arka Harbor, the stranger it gets. Tonight was only the beginning. By the time my second night in Arka Harbor arrived, I had convinced myself that the scraping outside my apartment door had been the building settling in the cold, or at least something explainable enough to let me sleep for a few hours. But when I walked into the station the next evening, Reed gave me a look that made the hairs on my arms rise. It wasn't suspicion or concern, it was recognition. The kind a person gives someone who has just taken their first step into a world they can't unsee. "Rough night?" he asked. I almost said no. Old habits from a lifetime of policing told me not to admit weakness, especially not on day 2. But something about Reed's steady gaze made me answer honestly. I heard something in the hallway. What kind of something? Scraping, like fingernails. Reed exhaled, his breath fogging the air even inside the warm station. He didn't say, "You imagined it." He didn't laugh or offer some rational explanation. He just nodded in a way that told me he had heard the same sound before. "Sometimes the building shifts," he said carefully. "Sometimes it's not the building. If it happens again, check the clock." "Why?" He hesitated. "If it's past dusk, don't open your door, and don't walk out into the hallway alone." His tone was low, almost gentle, but the warning underneath it felt like a blade. I wanted to ask more, but Chief Ellsworth stepped out of her office then, holding a file in one hand and a mug of black coffee in the other. "Hail. Patrol with Reed tonight. Stick close. Don't improvise." She paused, studying me. "And carry the rulebook." Her gaze flicked briefly to my jacket pocket, where the leather card rested with a weight I still wasn't used to. Then she turned and disappeared back into her office. For the next few hours, Reed and I handled routine calls, the kind I could have done in my sleep. Noise complaint behind the diner, a vehicle stuck in a drift, a fisherman with a cut hand, a couple arguing over a propane heater. But there was something eerie about even the simplest tasks. The streets were quiet in a way I couldn't describe. Not just emptier, but observing, like the town itself was waiting for something. Around 10 p.m., we stopped for coffee at a small shack near the center of town. The woman working the counter poured our drinks with trembling hands, her eyes fixed on the clock behind her. When it struck 10:01, she locked the windows, flipped the sign to closed, and shut off the outdoor lights. "Curfew?" I asked Reed as we walked back to the SUV. "Not officially, people just know better than to be out too late." "Know better because of the rules?" He didn't answer directly. "Because the rules keep them alive," he said instead. The words echoed through me more deeply than I expected. We were halfway back to the station when the radio cracked with static. Unit 1, respond to possible break-in at the maintenance supply building. Caller reports hearing something on the roof. Repeat, something on the roof." The dispatcher's voice trembled at the last line. Reed stiffened. The maintenance building had a flat roof. Snow piled thick on top of it all winter. No person could move on it without falling through. The structure was old, built long before the town had a proper code. Even a snowshoe rabbit would crash straight through the rotten planks. But something was on that roof. Reed pulled the SUV to a stop in front of the building. The wind had picked up, and the loose sheets of metal siding groaned as cold gusts pushed against them. A single light bulb flickered above the doorway. "Stay near me," Reed said quietly. "And if you hear anything above us, don't speak." I swallowed hard. "So Rule 1 applies here too?" "Rule 1 applies everywhere," he said. We stepped out into the cold. Snow crunched loudly beneath our boots, sounding unnaturally sharp in the still night. I scanned the rooftop. At first I saw nothing, just snow piled thick like stale frosting. But then the surface moved, not like something heavy walked across it, more subtle, more calculated. As if something beneath the snow was dragging itself across the roof in a slow, deliberate crawl. "Do you see that?" I whispered. Reed didn't look upward. He kept his eyes on the doorway. "Don't acknowledge it, but don't look at it, Jordan." There was something about the way he said my name, steady without panic, that made me obey. I dropped my gaze to the door. The movement above us continued, soft and eerie, like fingertips brushing fabric. Whatever it was testing the structure, pressing gently along the beams as if searching for the weak points. The radio crackled again. "Unit 1, the caller says the noise is getting louder. Please advise." Reed lifted the radio to his mouth. "Tell them to stay inside. Lock every door. And do not, under any circumstances, look up." Static filled the line for several seconds before the dispatcher answered with a shaky acknowledgement. We pushed into the maintenance building. Our flashlights cut through the dust and cold. The place smelled like mildew and old insulation. Shelves filled the space from floor to ceiling, stocked with tools, chains, cans of paint, boxes of nails. Nothing looked disturbed, no sign of a break-in, except for the footprints. A single set of tracks led from the doorway into the room. They weren't deep, but each print was elongated, unnaturally so, as if the toes had dragged slightly behind. They stopped at the center of the room and disappeared. I knelt and brushed my fingers along the final print. It was colder than the others, much colder. A chill crawled up my arm, settling into my wrist like ice water. The entire building seemed to tremble then, a faint vibration that traveled from the rafters to the floor. And then the footsteps on the roof changed. No longer slow drags. Now they were quick, sharp, like a child running. Reed snapped his fingers near my shoulder. "We're leaving. Now!" I stood quickly. My flashlight beam trembled as the noise overhead grew louder. The sound rushed from one end of the building to the other, too fast, too light, too purposeful. It wasn't pacing anymore. It was circling. I asked the question without meaning to. "What is it?" Reed grabbed the door handle. "Rule 1. That was the only answer he gave me. We made it outside just as a deep crack echoed through the structure. Snow collapsed inward. Something punched through the rooftop, a pale shape, fast and slender. A blur of motion sliding back under the snow before I could register anything more. My heart hammered violently. Reed locked the door behind us and pulled me toward the SUV. "Don't look back." I didn't. I kept staring straight ahead until we reached the vehicle. Only when we were inside with the door shut did he finally speak. That was a roof runner, one of the older ones. They mimic weight, sound, even patterns of movement. But they're not. He searched for the right word. They're not meant to be seen directly. I breathed slowly, waiting for my pulse to settle. How do we deal with them? "We don't," he said. "We avoid them. That's why the rule exists." As we drove back to the station, I couldn't stop thinking about the way the thing had moved, like it wasn't bound by gravity or muscle or anything earthly. It had felt deliberate. A hunter testing its prey. When we reached the station, Chief Ellsworth stepped outside, her breath fogging the air. "Report." Reed gave a clipped summary. She listened, expression unreadable. "Any eye contact?" she asked. Reed shook his head. Hale didn't look. Good. Her gaze settled on me then, sharp, weighing something unseen. "You did well tonight." It didn't feel like praise. It felt like a warning wrapped in reassurance. Inside the station, I hung my coat and tried to process the encounter. But before I could sit down, Chief Ellsworth called my name from her office. "Close the door behind you." I did. She stood by her desk, a map of Arka Harbor spread across it. The map was old, edges frayed, corners stained. But it wasn't the layout of the town that caught my eye. It was the markings, symbols carved into the paper, not drawn. Deep grooves forming circles and lines that looked like they belonged to an ancient language. "You saw your first rule breaker tonight," she said. "Rule breaker? That's what we call anything that forces the rules to activate. The things we deal with, they're not random. They test, they wait, they watch for cracks." Her eyes softened, but only slightly. "The rules protect us, Officer Hale, but only if we respect them. You did, and that means you're capable of surviving here." I shifted, unsure whether to feel pride or unease. "Chief, what exactly are these things?" She closed her eyes for a moment. "A better question is where they come from." But before she could continue, the sound came again, a soft, rhythmic series of footsteps above the station. Not heavy, not human, light, almost playful. Chief Ellsworth's eyes snapped open. "Get out!" Her voice held no hesitation, no fear, just the firm command of someone who had lived this moment too many times. Reed appeared at the office doorway. "They're early tonight. Move, both of you." I obeyed without question. We filed out of the station quickly, stepping into the freezing night. The air was unnervingly still. Above us, something scampered along the roof, pacing the length of the building. I resisted the instinct to look up. We walked several yards away before the sound stopped abruptly. Reed kept his voice low. "It knows you're new. They always test the newcomers harder." "Why?" "Because new eyes are easier to pull." Chief Ellsworth turned toward me. "Hale, there's something you need to know. You're not just here to fill a vacancy. Arka Harbor chose you." Her words chilled me more than the wind ever could. "Why me?" She hesitated. "Because the rulebook reacts to you." I froze. "Reacts how?" "You felt it, didn't you?" "Earlier. The warmth. The pull. I had. When I held the rulebook at the maintenance building, a pulse had traveled through it, subtle but unmistakable. The rules recognize something in you," she continued. "It doesn't happen often. But when it does..." She didn't finish. Reed placed a hand on my shoulder. "Get some rest, Jordan. Tomorrow you'll learn more than you want to." But rest never came, not when I finally sat on my bed hours later, staring at the rulebook sitting on my nightstand. At 2:14 a.m., the scraping in the hallway returned, exactly as before, soft, rhythmic, patient. I didn't open the door, I didn't breathe loudly, I didn't move. The rulebook pulsed warm beneath the lamp glow, as if acknowledging the danger outside. And for the first time since arriving in Arka Harbor, I understood something with absolute clarity. The rules weren't here to protect us from the dark. They were here to warn the dark that we knew how to survive it. By the third night, the sense of being watched had become almost familiar. an unwanted companion I couldn't shake even in daylight. The scraping outside my apartment door the previous night still played in my head like a looping recording. Each delicate drag of fingernails slicing cleanly through my nerves. Sleep came in fractured pieces, and every time I drifted off, the same image haunted me. A pale silhouette crouched outside my door, smiling without a face. When the morning sun finally rose over Arka Harbor, the light felt thin, more suggestion than illumination. A kind of soft glow that softened nothing. The air in the streets carried a tension I hadn't noticed before, the quiet hum of people holding back fear they refused to name. A woman hurried out of the general store with groceries, eyes flicking toward the rooftops before she ducked her head and rushed toward home. A fisherman locked his truck 3 times before starting the engine, glancing at his mirrors as if expecting something to climb into the bed while he wasn't looking. This was the normal here. I understood that now. When I stepped into the station, Reed was waiting for me, sitting on the edge of my desk with 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one without a word. I took it gratefully. "Rough night?" he asked. "Is that your way of saying I look like hell? You look like you saw exactly what this town wanted you to see." I paused mid-sip. "Wanted?" Reed nodded. Arka Harbor doesn't just test people randomly. It watches how you react, and it pushes harder if it thinks you're capable of pushing back. That wasn't comforting, but there was no mockery in Reed's voice. He wasn't warning me to scare me, he was preparing me. "The chief wants you in her office," he said finally. I entered with a tightness in my chest I couldn't fully hide. Chief Ellsworth stood near the far wall, staring at a photo pinned to a corkboard. A black and white image of the town taken decades ago. Beside it were a dozen smaller pictures. Police officers all posed in front of the same building I now walked through every day. "Recognize anyone?" she asked. I studied the faces. Some looked familiar, but not because I'd met them. Rather because I'd seen their names written on the inside flap of the Rulebook. Small initials carved into the leather, faded with age. "These are the ones who didn't make it?" I asked quietly. "No. These are the ones who did. The ones who survived long enough to pass the Rulebook on. The ones the town chose." The room felt suddenly colder. "What about the ones who didn't survive?" She pointed to a filing cabinet in the corner, its drawers labeled with years I didn't want to think about. "They don't get pictures." She turned to me fully then, her expression unreadable. "You're here because the Rulebook reacted to you. That means Arka Harbor sees something in you, something it needs. But that also means the town expects more from you than most officers. Reed will take you deeper tonight, the farther edges, the places where the rules were born. Learn everything he shows you. You'll need it." Before I could respond, she gestured toward the door, dismissing me. Whatever she wasn't saying felt heavy enough to crush the oxygen in the room. Outside, Reed was waiting. "Ready?" he asked. "Doesn't feel like I have a choice." "You don't." "Not really." He gave me a faint smile and pushed open the door to the cold night outside. We drove through town at a slow pace, our headlights carving thin beams through the early dusk. Houses glowed from within, but the streets were already empty. People didn't linger outside at night in Arka Harbor, not unless they had a death wish or a reason stronger than fear. "Where are we going?" I asked. "The old ridge. Northwest side. Nobody lives out there anymore." "Why not?" Reed hesitated. "Because that's where the rules started." The SUV rumbled along a narrow road that twisted upward into the hills. The forest pressed in on either side of us, branches bending low enough to scrape against the windows. The sound was faint but sharp, like skeletal fingers tapping glass. "The first rule was born up here," Reed said quietly, "long before Arka Harbor was a town. Before there was even a station to hear the laughter inside." The headlights illuminated a rusted sign half buried in snow. It read, "Ridge Watchtower Restricted." We parked near what had once been a trailhead. The wooden structure of the watchtower rose above the tree line, a black latticework silhouette against the dim sky. We climbed the steps slowly. Halfway up, an icy wind sliced through me, sharp enough to feel like needles under my skin. Something about the tower felt wrong. Not evil, not haunted, just displaced. Like it existed slightly out of sync with the world around it. When we reached the top platform, Reed pointed toward a dark patch in the woods below. "That's where the first officer disappeared in 1951. He heard something moving beneath the tower floorboards, thought it was an animal, went down there with only a lantern." What did he see? Reed didn't look at me, not what, who. The lantern was found still burning. The officer wasn't. A chill ran through me. The tower swayed gently with the wind, creaking in a slow, rhythmic arc. Then I heard it, footsteps, light, deliberate, coming from directly beneath us. Reed stiffened. His hand moved toward his holster, then stopped. Instead, he whispered, "Do not speak, do not kneel, do not lean over the edge, and above all, do not answer it. Answer what?" But then a voice floated up from the darkness beneath the boards. "Help me." It was faint at first. A whisper threaded through the wind, then louder. "Help me. Please." It was the voice of a child. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7. Reed's jaw clenched so tight I saw the muscle twitch. "It's not a kid," he murmured. "It's never a kid." The voice spoke again. "My leg is stuck. Please, I can't move. Please help me." Something scraped along the underside of the platform, a slow drag of nails. Then another whisper. "I know you hear me." My throat tightened. Reed stayed perfectly still. "She always sounds like someone different," he whispered. The voice shifts. It becomes whoever you're most inclined to help, whoever you're vulnerable to. The voice below changed then, became deeper, familiar. "Dad?" My blood froze. "Dad, it hurts. I need you. I couldn't breathe, couldn't swallow. It wasn't possible. And yet..." Reed grabbed my sleeve hard. "It's not him, Jordan. Look at me, not the floor." I forced myself to meet Reed's eyes. The voice below shifted again, becoming a chorus of sounds, children, adults, people screaming, laughing, whispering. Then silence. "It always stops once it knows you won't look," Reed said. But if we had leaned over the edge or answered, what happens if someone responds? They fall. Fall? The voice pulls them over the edge. They climb down to help, thinking they see someone trapped. And once they step off the platform. He didn't finish. We left the tower quickly, descending the stairs with deliberate steps. The wind grew sharper as if pushing against us. But the moment our feet touched solid ground again, the cold eased. Reed exhaled. That was Rule 6. There's a 6th rule, unofficially. Never answer a voice calling from below you. I swallowed hard. Why isn't that in the rulebook? Because the things beneath the watchtower don't leave the ridge. As long as nobody builds on that land again, we're safe. The 5 rules in your book apply everywhere. This one only applies here. We started back toward the SUV when a sound echoed through the forest. 3 knocks, sharp, clear, too close. Reed froze. "It's earlier than usual," he whispered. Knocks echoed again. 3, same cadence, same unnatural clarity. "That one you already know," Reed said. "Rule 4. Never open the door after midnight, I said automatically. Except we're not at a door. Reed nodded grimly. And that's the problem. It's learning. The knocks came again. This time from behind us. Do not turn around, Reed said quietly. Keep walking. Slow and steady. My legs tingled with adrenaline, but I forced my steps to remain even. The knocking drifted around the trees like something circling prey. Closer, further, then closer again. Reed spoke without looking at me. Jordan. In a moment, you're going to feel a hand on your shoulder. It won't be mine. Don't respond. Don't move. Don't acknowledge it. No matter what you feel, you keep walking. My pulse thundered inside my skull. Then I felt it. A cold weight settled gently on my left shoulder. Not a full grab. Just a touch, like someone placing their hand there, testing my reaction. The air around me thickened. My breath condensed in frantic clouds. Reed opened the SUV door. Get in. Slowly. I moved with agonizing restraint, climbing inside without shaking the phantom touch off my shoulder. The moment I shut the door, the knocking stopped and the hand vanished. Reed started the engine, breath shaking just slightly. Congratulations, he said. You survived a double rule event. A what? 2 different entities interacting in one location. Very rare, very dangerous. The town is watching you closely. You mean the town's alive? Reed didn't answer at first. He stared through the windshield at the silent forest, his eyes distant. Maybe not alive, he said slowly, but aware, connected to something deeper, something older than all of us. And it expects certain people to uphold the balance. Why me? I asked quietly. What did I do? He smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile. You didn't do anything, Jordan. You just showed up. And sometimes showing up is enough for a place like this to claim you. We drove back toward town in silence. Houses appeared again through the trees, glowing softly against the early night. But I noticed something new. Shadows along the rooftops. Not human shapes, not animal shapes. Just suggestions of movement that melted away when the headlights approached. Things were gathering. Reed parked in front of the station and finally said, Tomorrow, Dizomondun, the chief will show you the origins of Rule 2. It's the one new officers struggle with the most. Why? Because if you break it, you don't die. Not immediately. He turned the key and the SUV engine cut off. You just disappear, one memory at a time, until you're standing in front of us, alive, breathing, and completely empty. The station lights flickered once as if reacting to his words. Something in the air had shifted, and for the first time since arriving in Arka Harbor, I realized the rules weren't just protecting us from the things outside. They were protecting us from something far more dangerous. Something inside. By the time dawn crept over Arka Harbor, I was running on caffeine and instinct, anchored only by the stubborn part of me that refused to let fear make my decisions. The events on the ridge tower still clung to me. The child's voice, the hand on my shoulder, the way the forest seemed to breathe with a presence that was neither wind nor wildlife. Reed had dropped me off at the station a little past 5 a.m., and for a moment I sat in the SUV staring at the quiet building as if it might start laughing again. But nothing happened. Nothing ever happened in daylight in Arka Harbor. That was the most unsettling part. The daylight acted like a polite host distracting guests from the rot under the floorboards. When I finally stepped inside, Chief Ellsworth was waiting for me with a thermos of coffee and an expression that seemed halfway between relief and resignation. "Sit," she said. I obeyed. She set the thermos in front of me and leaned back against her desk. Reed told me what happened last night. I swallowed. Which part? All of it. She folded her arms. You handled it better than your predecessors. Predecessors. The word landed like a cold stone. Did they not make it? Some did, some didn't. Some ran, some lost themselves. Most were chosen like you, though they didn't know it at the time. The town doesn't react to everyone, Jordan. But when it reacts to someone, the rules shift. The patterns change. The danger increases before it decreases again. That's why you need to learn everything we can teach you before the next escalation. Escalation. Her tone made the word feel like a prophecy. Chief, what exactly are the rules? I mean, beyond survival tactics. She exhaled slowly. They're bindings, agreements. They were created long before Arka Harbor existed as a town, generations before we ever built this station. They keep the boundary in place. They keep the entities from stepping fully into our world. But the rules don't come from us. They come from them. She paused. And sometimes they start to change on their own. Before I could ask what that meant, the phone on her desk rang, a sharp, jarring sound that shattered the heavy atmosphere. She answered, listened for 10 seconds, then pressed her hand over the receiver. You're going with Reed. Another sighting near the shoreline. Something large, moving under the ice. A flicker of something, fear, crossed her face. Rule 2 applies. Don't break it. But Rule 2 was about the faceless ones, the silent watchers in the woods. Chief, what's on the ice? Her eyes didn't waver. Not the woods, not the rooftops, not the whispers. A different one. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want them. Outside, Reed was already warming up the SUV. He handed me a pair of insulated gloves and an extra flashlight. The shoreline? I asked. He nodded. Ice fishermen heard something. Then one of them saw a hand reach up from a crack. They ran before seeing anything else. A hand? Reed didn't look at me. Not the human kind. Snow hammered the windshield as we drove, thick flakes swirling in chaotic spirals that made the world outside look like static. The sun was up, but the sky was bruised gray, heavy with storm clouds. We parked near the coastline, where the frozen ocean stretched out like a pale desert, cracked and splintered in jagged veins. You stay behind me, Reed said. If something moves, we don't investigate. We observe, and we do not go near any cracks in the ice. He stepped forward, I followed. The wind cut at our faces like razors. The ice creaked beneath our boots with deep, resonant groans that vibrated through my bones. As we moved farther out, the coastline shrank behind us until it was nothing more than a strip of white and gray. Then we heard it. A thud, soft at first, like a fist hitting wood from below. Another thud, stronger. The ice beneath us trembled. Reed motioned silently for me to step back. I obeyed, holding my breath as a crack split across the surface with a sharp snap. Don't move, Reed whispered. The thuds continued, a slow rhythm. Something trapped? Something calling, something knocking? No, the rhythm wasn't knocking from desperation, it was knocking for attention. The ice bulged upward, something pushed against it from below. Reed grabbed my arm. Back, Jordan, back now! We retreated several feet, boots sliding across the slick surface. A pale shape pressed harder against the ice from underneath, an elongated hand with too many joints, fingers bending backward at impossible angles. It scraped along the underside of the ice like claws dragging across glass. My throat closed. What is that? Reed didn't answer. He couldn't. Because a face pressed up beneath the ice next, long, smooth, and featureless, a faceless entity. But not the same kind I'd seen in the woods. This one was larger, Its head was elongated, its body shape stretching beneath the ice like a shadow swimming in deep water. It pulled itself closer. The ice dipped slightly. Reed pulled out his radio. "Chief, we need backup. The second variant's at the shoreline." Static answered him. Then 3 knocks echoed across the ice behind us. Not from below, from behind. Reed's face went pale. "It's coordinating," he whispered. "2 at once. That shouldn't be possible." Slowly, carefully, I turned my head just enough to glimpse the shore. Something stood there, tall, thin, a single white-eyed woman, her too wide, impossible smile stretching across her unnatural face as she watched us from a distance. Reed's voice was barely audible. "It wants us to run toward her." I turned back toward the ice, but the faceless thing beneath us was creeping closer, its fingers tapping slowly against the frozen barrier. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm echoed the knocks behind us. They were communicating. "Jordan, we need to move sideways," Reed said. "Not toward shore, not toward deep water, sideways." We stepped carefully, sliding along the ice at a diagonal angle. The creature beneath followed. The woman on shore mirrored our movement, pacing with that stiff, floaty walk the white-eyed ones used when they mimicked human steps. We were being herded. The chief was right. The rules were changing. A loud crack split across the ice. I lost my footing for a moment, arms flailing as a chunk of frozen surface shifted under my boot. Reed grabbed my collar and yanked me upright. "Don't fall. Ever." We kept moving sideways, inch by inch, until the shoreline curved enough that the white-eyed woman drifted out of sight behind a snowdrift. Reed pulled me faster now. The thing beneath the ice thudded desperately against the surface, banging harder, as if it knew we were slipping outside its trap. The radio finally crackled. "Reed, hail. Hold your position." Chief Ellsworth's voice. "Negative," Reed said. "Multiple entities, they're working together. We're exiting now." The chief's voice sharpened. "Do not let it see your face." "Which one?" I asked. "All of them," she said. Reed grabbed my arm again and quickened our pace. We moved until the ice rose into a more stable ridge near the rocks. Once our boots hit thicker ice, the knocking stopped abruptly. The thing beneath the surface drifted away, its pale form shrinking like a sinking ghost. Reed exhaled. We didn't speak until we reached the SUV. Once inside, I noticed his hands were trembling. He took 3 deep breaths before saying, "That was a breach attempt." I stared at him. "A what?" "A test of the boundary. They never coordinate, ever. But today, something's changed. Something's evolving, or something is pushing them." I leaned back against the seat, trying to calm the pounding in my chest. Chief Ellsworth said the rules were bindings, agreements. "Does this mean the agreements are breaking?" Reed didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "It means someone or something is trying to rewrite them." We drove back toward town in silence, snow pelting the windshield like pebbles, but the silence wasn't calming. It felt charged, like static collecting before lightning. Halfway back, Reed asked, "Jordan, did the thing beneath the ice look directly at you?" I shook my head. "No, but it tried to follow my shadow." Reed cursed under his breath. "That's worse. Shadows carry memory. If it followed your shadow, it might learn your shape." "Learn my shape?" He nodded. "The entities can't cross fully into our world, not without the rules weakening first. But if they learn enough, they can take a form close enough to blend. To mimic." We reached the station and Reed didn't even bother turning off the engine before turning to me. "You need to talk to the chief about what happened. Tell her everything. Don't leave out a single detail. Because what you saw today, and it's the start of something we haven't dealt with in decades. I got out of the car and headed inside. The station felt different again. Lights too dim, hallways too narrow, air too still. The quiet pressed in like a weight. Chief Ellsworth sat at her desk, waiting. Report. I told her everything. The knocking behind us, the faceless entity beneath the ice, the coordinated movement. She listened without blinking, her face unreadable. When I finished, she rose from her chair and walked to the window, staring out at the gray sky. We need to prepare you for Rule 2, she said quietly. The faceless ones are changing, and if one ever steps out from the woods or the ice and imitates someone you know, her shoulders stiffened. That's when officers die. Jordan, tomorrow you go back to the forest, with me this time. I stared at her. Why me? Because the faceless are watching you now, she said. And that means the boundary is thinning in places it shouldn't. Outside the window, something tall moved between the trees just beyond the edge of my vision. A shadow, a suggestion, a silent watcher. And in that moment, I understood something with a clarity so sharp it felt like pain. The rules weren't just being challenged. They were beginning to fail. The night after the shoreline incident felt different from every other night I'd spent in Arka Harbor. It was as if the very air had shifted, thicker, charged, trembling with an anticipation I couldn't name. The cold itself felt altered. No longer a natural presence, but an intentional one, like someone gently pressing a hand against the back of your neck. By dusk, the town seemed to be holding its breath. Inside the station, Chief Ellsworth moved with a purpose I hadn't seen before. She wasn't just preparing for another patrol, she was preparing for something inevitable, something ancient. Something that, judging by the grim set of her jaw, she had hoped would not happen for years yet. She closed the blinds, dimming the room until only the desk lamp cast a pool of light between us. Jordan, sit down. Her voice held no room for argument. But she wasn't reprimanding me. She sounded tired, worn, as if the weight of what she was about to say had been on her shoulders for decades. Reed entered a moment later, shaking snow from his jacket. He leaned against the wall, arms folded as though bracing himself. Chief Ellsworth placed the rulebook on the desk. You've memorized these, she said quietly. I nodded. Every word, every rule. Good. Because tonight the rules change. Something tightened inside my chest. Chief, what do you mean? She tapped the last line, the blank space beneath Rule 6. Rule 7 is missing for a reason. It isn't a rule we can teach. It isn't written because it becomes different for each chosen officer. It must be earned, and it must be performed. Tonight is the crossfade. I had heard that word before, once in passing, murmured between two locals near the general store. It carried fear in the shape of breath. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew enough to understand it was not good. What is the crossfade? I asked. Reed stepped forward. It's the night the boundary weakens. Every few decades, the worlds overlap slightly, just a fraction, but enough for them to see us, enough for them to move closer, enough for them to try to cross. Chief Ellsworth continued. The rulebook was created to keep the boundary intact. The entities obey the rules because they're old, older than anything human. The rules bind them, restrict them. But on the crossfade, one binding cracks open unless a chosen officer seals it again. Reed looked at me. No hesitation, no pity. This time, Jordan, it's you. I felt my pulse spike. Why me? Because the town reacted to you. The rulebook warmed in your hands. The entities noticed you before they noticed anyone else. Reed's voice deepened. You were chosen the moment you stepped off that plane. Chief Ellsworth lifted the rulebook again, holding it like an oath. Rule 7, she said softly, is simple in writing, impossible in practice. She leaned forward, eyes fixed on mine. If the boundary cracks, one officer must stand in the center of town and refuse the voices. Refuse the voices? What voices? Reed answered. All of them. Chief Ellsworth gestured for me to follow her. She led me out the back door into the cold, open night. The air was wrong, still heavy, brimming with static. The sky above Arka Harbor shimmered with pale green threads of aurora that twisted unnaturally, as if reacting to something beneath the earth. The townspeople were indoors, lights off. Curtains drawn, no dogs barked, no engines hummed, not a single sound. Arka Harbor was silent because it knew what was coming. We walked to the center of town, to a roundabout with a small bronze statue of a fisherman. At his feet lay a flat stone embedded in the ground, carved with symbols so old they looked like cracks in the earth itself. This is the sigil stone, Chief Ellsworth said. When the crossfade begins, this stone weakens. The boundary tears. You must stand on it. You must reject everything you hear, everything you see, everything they try to show you. They will try to make you speak. They will use memories, voices, loved ones, guilt, fear, anything they can reach inside you to find. Reed placed a hand on my shoulder. If you speak even a single word back, the boundary fails. I stared at the stone, and if I stay silent, the boundary holds, Chief Ellsworth said, and the town survives. And if I break, Reed's jaw tightened, then you disappear into their world, not as a body, as a voice, one the next chosen officer will hear. The cold hit harder than any wind as her meaning sank in. You're telling me the voices, the knocks, the laughter, those are the ones who failed. My throat closed. Suddenly, the child's voice at the watchtower felt different, terrifying in a new way, not because it was monstrous, but because it might have once been human. Chief Ellsworth placed the rulebook in my hands. Stand strong. Use your fear. Don't let it use you. Before I could speak, a sharp crack echoed across the sky. It wasn't thunder. The air itself rippled, an audible vibration like metal warping under tension. Then the lights in the houses flickered. The ground shuddered. The aurora above twisted violently, spiraling inward until it looked like a glowing wound in the sky. Reed whispered, "It's starting." A low hum began, soft at first, like distant wind. Then voices, too many to count, layered, whispering, murmuring, laughing, crying, calling. Jordan, Jordan, Jordan. They spoke my name in 100 tones, a child's voice, a woman's, a man's, my father's. I staggered. Reed grabbed my arm. "Go, stand on the stone, now." I stepped onto the sigil and the stone trembled beneath my boots. The rulebook in my hands pulsed with warmth, the leather glowing faintly, like a heartbeat. The voices grew louder. "Jordan! Jordan, look at us! Jordan, help us! Jordan, why didn't you save us?" I squeezed my eyes shut. Another voice joined them, one I knew instantly, my sister's. "Jordan, it's me. Please, please talk to me." My chest tightened painfully. My sister wasn't dead. She lived thousands of miles away in Ohio, but the voice matched perfectly, exactly the way she sounded when she was scared. The wind whipped around me in spirals. Shadows gathered at the edges of the roundabout, figures tall and thin and wrong, faceless ones, echoers. The white-eyed woman, the thing from the ice, their silhouettes flickered like broken reflections. They whispered in chorus, "Just say one word and it ends." The rulebook burned in my hands now, hot, pulsing, as if urging me to stay silent, but then a new voice rose above the rest, a man's, cold, familiar. Dad. The world tilted. My father had died 3 years ago. I hadn't heard his voice since, hadn't imagined it, hadn't let myself, but now he spoke as if he were standing inches behind me. Jordan, I'm proud of you. My breath hitched, my heart pulled toward the sound. Jordan, talk to me once more, just once, please. My knees trembled. The rules vanished in my mind, replaced by grief sharp enough to wound. My throat opened. I almost spoke. Almost. But then something streaked across the ground beside me, a small, dark blur. A black Arctic fox. The same one from Rule 5. It sat at the edge of the sigil stone, staring at me with impossibly bright golden eyes. It didn't make a sound. It didn't move. It simply watched me, held me to the earth, anchored me. I closed my mouth, clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. The fox blinked slowly, then, "You're not alone," lingered in the space between us, unspoken but understood. The voices around me screamed in rage. Their whispers turned feral, their shapes writhed. The white-eyed woman stepped closer, her smile stretching wider than any human jaw should allow. The faceless beings trembled violently as if peeling themselves out of reality. The voice of my father shifted, distorting into something harsh, cruel, impossible. "Jordan, speak." I didn't. I breathed, one breath, another. And then the rulebook grew burning hot, too hot to hold, yet I didn't drop it. The stone beneath me pulsed with seams of glowing light. The ground shook. The aurora above contracted into a single tight spiral and then burst outward in a wave of emerald fire. The voices screamed, the shadows convulsed, the entities fractured like smoke torn apart by wind. And then the world went silent, completely, painfully, beautifully silent. The aurora calmed, the stone cooled, the fox stepped back, tail flicking once as if in farewell before trotting into the darkness without a sound. Reed ran toward me. "Jordan, are you all right?" I opened my eyes. The world had steadied. The air felt breathable again. The town was intact. "I'm okay," I said hoarsely. Chief Ellsworth stepped forward, her breath unsteady for the first time since I'd met her. "You did it," she said. "You sealed the crossfade." I exhaled shakily. "Is it over?" "For now," she said. "But something is changing. Tonight proved that. They coordinated. They pushed. They tried to rewrite what has been unchangeable for generations." Reed's voice was quiet. "They wanted you tonight, Jordan. Badly. Because they know you're the one who can hold them back." Chief Ellsworth picked up the rulebook from where it had fallen. Its last page, the blank page, glowed faintly in the lamplight. She handed it to me. "There's something new written here." I looked. At the bottom of the blank page, words were now etched into the leather. Words that hadn't existed before. Rule 7. When the boundary cracks, silence is your shield. Stand firm. Refuse the voices. The keeper speaks last. I read it again. The keeper speaks last. Chief Ellsworth nodded. "That's your title now. The keeper, the one who stands between the worlds." Reed smiled faintly. "Congratulations, Jordan, you earned it." I held the rulebook against my chest, the weight of it settling into my bones. The aurora above Arka Harbor shimmered softly, calm now. The shadows had retreated. The boundary had held. But as we walked back to the station, something tugged at my mind, a lingering thought, heavy and insistent. If the rules could rewrite themselves, what else could? When we reached the station door, Chief Ellsworth stopped me. "Jordan." I turned. "This won't be the last time. The next rule will be yours to write." I nodded slowly, gripping the rulebook. And in the reflection of the dark window beside her, for just a moment I saw it. A tall, faceless figure watching from the tree line. Silent, patient, waiting for the next crack. I didn't sleep the night after the crossfade. Not because I was afraid. Fear was something I had learned to fold, to quiet, to put in my pocket like a familiar stone. But because the silence felt different. It wasn't the silence of an empty town. It was the silence of a world resetting itself, deciding what to do with the man who refused the voices. Around 3 a.m, I stepped outside the station. Snow was falling again, thin, drifting flakes that glowed faintly under the street lamps. Arka harbor was still. No footsteps, no laughter, no shapes on the rooftops. Just the sound of my own breathing and the distant churn of the ocean beneath the ice. For the first time since arriving here, the town didn't feel hostile. It felt grateful. I walked to the center of the roundabout where the sigil stone lay quietly beneath the snow. I brushed the surface with my glove. It was warm, alive. The boundary was sealed, at least for now. But as I stood there, the truth washed over me like a slow tide. I wasn't the same man who had arrived here 5 nights ago. Back then, I came looking for a fresh start. Now the town had given me something else entirely, purpose-born from the kind of darkness most people never survive. A soft crunch interrupted my thoughts. I turned. The black fox sat at the edge of the street, its fur dusted with snow, golden eyes reflecting the lamplight like twin sparks. It didn't approach, didn't flee, just watched me with the calm understanding of something ancient. For a moment, I wondered if it was really an animal at all, or something the boundary itself had sent to keep me aligned with the world I still belonged to. "Thank you," I whispered, even though Rule 7 lived quietly in my throat, reminding me of the power silence now held in my life. The fox blinked once, turned, and vanished into the trees. I should have felt alone then, but I didn't. Because standing in that frozen intersection with a town sleeping safely behind its curtains and a darkness held back only by a thin thread of rules, I understood something that would stay with me for the rest of my life. Survival isn't about strength. It's about steadiness. It's about knowing when to run, when to listen, and when to stand in the center of a storm, spine straight, heart steady, refusing the voices that promise comfort at a cost. Most people think courage is loud, but here, in Arka Harbor, courage is silence. As I turned to go back inside, the aurora rippled overhead, soft and green and impossibly fragile. For a heartbeat, it looked like the sky was breathing, and in that breath I felt a strange, quiet peace. Tomorrow the rules might shift again. Tomorrow the boundary might tremble. Tomorrow, something might test me in ways I can't prepare for. But tonight the town was safe. And if the day ever comes when the voices rise again, when the boundary cracks, when the world leans too far into ours, I'll be here. The keeper speaks last, and I'm not done speaking yet.